All right, welcome everybody. It looks like everyone who is with us in the waiting room has made their way in. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Carly Wright. I am the Vice President of Advocacy, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion here at Shape America. And we are very excited for a wonderful conversation with you all tonight about our K through 12 national physical education standards. We're excited to share some updates with you in advance of our first round of public comment and review. We have our National PE Standards Task Force, who has been hard at work over the past year, here to share some updates with you in advance of that survey that will be coming out for your feedback next week, and are excited to hear from you all as well, because we know feedback from the field is a really critical, important part of this process. So before I kick it off to the task force, we'll be doing a presentation portion first tonight. So we'll ask those of you who are not task force members, if you'd be willing to just turn off your videos for now. We will have opportunity for you to turn on your videos and to share your feedback at the end of our session this evening, but just to make sure everybody can see what they need to see for the time being, we'll ask you to turn off your microphones and your videos for now. And with that, I will kick it off to our task force chair, Sally Jones, to take it from here. Thanks, Sally.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for being here. Bear with me. Technology is not always my kind friend, but I am going to attempt to share my screen. Thank you for being here to the town hall, for listening. We are excited to be here and to share what we have begun thus far in our work. The first thing I wanted to share with you all is our task force members, and not everyone could be here with us tonight, but the ones that could make it, they're here. Everyone say hello, wave to the crowd. Our common thread in our common thread is physical education, but we are a very diverse group representing different ethnicities, cultures, identities, and experiences, both personally and professionally. Combined, we have this wealth of knowledge and extensive experience to this work that we are doing on this revision process. We have school level teachers, school coordinators, higher ed faculty, State Department of Ed folks. We have a CDC liaison, national board certified folks. We have folks that are certified adapted physical educators. We have teachers that have strong SEL knowledge and background, those that have a justice and EDI lens, strong motor development, dance, pedagogy, and adapted physical education. So we come with this vast knowledge that we have and share. Task force members, thank you for showing. If you don't want to be on camera anymore, you're more than welcome to hide. But also feel free that if you want to jump in during this conversation, you're certainly welcome to. And thank you for being here. So I'm going to let Corey kind of start us off. Find your chat feature. All right, Corey.
Sure. So we're going to have a little bit of fun for a moment, right? So my version of fun, I guess. So what I'm going to do is share with you all a few events, and your responsibility is to guess which year these events are in reference to. So I'm going to share a few events, current events, and it's your responsibility to try to put in the chat which year you think these events represent. All right. So no Googling, no searching, no asking Siri on this one. All right. I'll just go through the list. So the first is Disney's Frozen was the highest grossing film this year. Outlook replaced Microsoft's free email server Hotmail. Candy Crush ranked #1 of games on Facebook. The iPhone 5C was released in this year. The Hump Day camo from the Geico commercials was popping up on all of our live cable commercials. And lastly, the word selfie was officially added to the Oxford Dictionary. And so it's your responsibility, given all of those different events, to guess which year you believe that represents in the chat. So we'll check the chat. I'm looking in there. We see, okay, 2008, 2010, 2014, 16, 13, 2014. We got a lot of good guesses in there. Some solid guesses. Solid guesses. So keep them coming. If you got an answer, now's your time to throw it in. 2011. Okay. These are some pretty good guesses. Pretty good guesses so far. All right. So the correct answer is the year 2013. 2013 is also the year that we most recently did a major revision to our Shape America national standards for physical education. So that conversation segues us into our next conversation about our process and rationale for doing so this year and the next few years.
Yeah. Our world today is not the same as it was 9 years ago since the last standards revision, and nor will it be the same 5 years from now. What remains is our call to action to serve every student 5 years from now. The Shape America National Physical Education Standards Task Force determined the process was not simply going to be a revision, but it was going to be a rewrite. And this decision was not made lightly, because this would change our whole approach and would require significant dedication and long-term commitment, far beyond what we initially had thought or was asked. It became quite clear to the task force that the current national physical education standards and outcomes did not meet the needs of every student. And we set out on a quest to make sure that we get this right. Each student should be able to see, to engage, and find themselves in the standards and outcomes. Likewise, the standards and outcomes should assist educators in providing equitable access to every student, regardless of the context that you are in. With this being a major goal, the task force recognizes the needs to address needs to address the inequities of the current standards and outcomes. While the task force acknowledges that the importance of motor competence is vital, we also know that it is not the sole attribute to equitably serve the whole child in their path and well-being to physical literacy. So with that, we're going to dive into a look at how this all began for us. And we're going to kind of detail that out just a little bit for you. How it started. Oh my gosh, it has been a wonderful, messy process. The task force analyzed and examined the current Shape America standards and outcomes. We looked at various states' physical education standards. We looked at physical education standards from other countries. We've looked at research. We've gotten feedback from town halls, collaboratives, surveys. We've listened to committees and focus groups. We've even met with different types of researchers along the way. And this analysis has led us to lots and lots and lots of philosophical and contextual conversations. And these conversations, while sometimes challenging and hard, actually, they were extremely critical in analyzing the various issues and ideas and concepts from a whole, from just every angle possible. It was quite a messy process, and we would go around and around in that event. Corey, do you have a perspective that you would like to share on this process?
Absolutely. So with the starting of the process, as Sally's mentioning, everything's very abstract. We're having conversations that could potentially be infinite, right? We can continue to share. There's so many different perspectives, thought processes, expertise shared even within this task force that it really became easy to fill up a 2.5 hour meeting with conversations and get to the end of it and say we need more time, right? And so having those conversations from every possible or potential avenue that we can manage within the time and space that we had to do so, I think was it was a very unique process, but I think it resulted in a lot of good work, and that process was starting to materialize those things with how our more abstract thoughts became more developed.
Yeah, absolutely. So from that messy process, we then sort of tried to organize that process the best we could, and to create a rational thought process. And we were using backwards design, and how we were thinking about also how students develop, and using feedback from some of the people that we heard from, like the EDI committee, and meetings with specific researchers. They're just, in fact, in this process, I think we had a lot of metaphors, and correct me if I'm wrong, task force, a lot of these metaphors were around food, but we had lots of metaphors in trying into models and trying to get our ideas put into some manageable way of thinking about things. And we were using Jamboards and Google Docs and SWOT analysis and note catchers, all to figure out how we get to where we want to go. And so it's been quite an interesting journey. And what we also figured out was how this was going to get our fingers to the keyboard. It used to be pen to paper, but now it's fingers to keyboard. So the future of physical education and its contribution to our students' well-being and the physical literacy journey sort of requires this philosophical shift that we take to advance our profession. And so once we were able to get organized, we really had to figure out what this shift meant. And so this shift requires teachers to look at physical education through a lens of meaningful movement and a student-centered approach. As a result of 1 year's work, I know that when you all see what we've created, you're going to go, it really took you a year to do this. Yes, it did. As Corey said, we could have gone in lots of different directions, and we could continue to have ongoing conversations. So when you look at this, don't look at it lightly, please. So after the result of 1 year's work, the task force has developed 2 documents for public review and comment. We've created guiding principles and student attributes. The first 2 documents provide a macro perspective and are grounded in the concepts of meaningful movement and the student-centered approach. The entirety of our work, the whole process in which we have been going through, is we've been thinking about every single student. We have been thinking about culture. We have been thinking about the groups of ethnicities that students of different ethnicities. We have been thinking about students with various abilities, both disabilities and those that might be high athletically gifted. We've also been thinking about students with various identities, and especially on today as Trans Visibility Day, the task force sees you. We see our trans students, and we are here to support you in any way that we can. The entirety of our work is research informed, it's process driven, it's feedback based, and it's improvement oriented. And so from there, we're going to jump into looking at our guiding principles.
So when we think about this idea of guiding principles, we created this document to give actionable steps to what teachers, what we believe teachers will be doing. And I got students outside my window waving. I'm sorry about that. Hello, students, care about people. All right. So I don't see them anymore. So in considering that as well, we're just thinking about, we came up with 10 different principles. We think that these principles are just age-old physical education principles that were initially developed to help guide our process in conceptualizing the attributes that we believe students should have. And so the teachers observe and implement to ensure proper and equitable access to PE and assist teachers in helping students find movement meaningful. We felt as though as a task force, before we, in our efforts to really materialize a lot of the things that we were conceptualizing, what are some of the principles that we'll use almost as the guardrails to keep us in alignment of the essence of physical education, of what physical education has been, the reason we all love and physical education and why we're here today. And so those principles help give us structure and a framework and boundaries when our minds and in the research and the ideas, we're just going so far. So these principles are supported by research and address the inequity and complexity of the contextual climate that we see in physical education today. So we wanted to go beyond just simply looking at just the physical nature of students and teachers and other stakeholders, and consider the true essence of the humanity of these different parties, and consider the ways in which we could capture the principles that are guiding our field.
Yeah, and when we started developing these, we didn't really initially develop them to be produced for public view. We actually were using them to help us determine and create our student attributes. But the more we dove into this work, we realized that this was going to be something that would be really beneficial to our educators. And so that's why we're creating this document for review. And we're going to show you, there are 10 principles, and we're going to show you 3 of them. And we're going to give you some time to look at these 3 principles. Before I do that though, I want to just remind folks to, if you have questions or comments, please hold those questions and comments to the end of the presentation. So make either jot down your comments or questions, or jot them down in your head, however you want to, so that at the end we could answer those, so that we can keep moving along. All right, now technology, don't fail me now.
And Sally, before you click on those, I'll also say that I think that our guiding principles were, in a way, that perfect balance between, sticking to the essence of what physical education has always been, and then also not being limited by certain structures. These guiding principles were a result of organic thinking processes and work and collaboration together.
Absolutely. Thank you for adding that. So let's hope my share works. I'm going to make it bigger for you when it allows me to. Can everybody see that okay? All right. And I'm going to scroll slowly. So we're showing you 3 different principles here.
Sally, I'll just add while you're showing these and folks are reading that these will be available next week when we circulate the survey for public comment and review for you to look at more in depth, just so you all are aware.
Thank you for adding that, Carly. You see key terms there. We are going to have a glossary available so that we make sure that everybody has a shared language. The glossary will not be available on this survey, though. I'm not going to spend a lot of time right here in our evidence section or in our reference section, but I am going to scroll through these just so that you can know that this has definitely been grounded in the research. Here's the third principle I wanted to show you. I will also say, and I'm thinking that the task force would agree, that we could go round and around and around on one particular word. We were very careful in choosing our words carefully, very carefully, because words matter. Again, key terms, major points. Here's the evidence. And our references. And the final guiding principle to show you tonight. Okay, so now I'm going to hop back to our PowerPoint. Everybody seeing the PowerPoint? Excellent. And now we're going to move on to the student attributes. So again, these we used the guiding principles to help us create these student attributes, which are going to guide us in creating our standards. These attributes are the basis of what we want students should know and be able to do as a result of their learning in physical education. And they come, this is a very, very macro perspective. When we think about our standards are very macro, and it's the outcomes that get into the micro. So keep in mind and keep that frame in your head that this is macro perspective. These are rooted in theory of meaningful movement, They also address the affective, cognitive, and psychomotor learning domains, but we also are introducing the idea of the fourth domain, social, to reflect the changing needs of today's students. So these attributes are sort of guiding the development of our new national physical education standards. I think, Corey, you wanted to provide some really good insight on that perspective and influence section.
Exactly. So one of the things that we considered while getting to this point is what are the perspectives that have influenced physical education, and what are the influences, the perspectives that are influencing physical education today. So we kind of, went through the gamut of our history, thinking about that social historical perspective where there's a heavy European influence, where we're seeing a lot of gymnastics in PE, where we're seeing very strict calisthenics, war readiness, and kind of taking that perspective and allowing that to influence physical education. We had that sports perspective where, youth sports becomes important, and we start doing more team-based sports and physical education, where our college and professional sports ramps up with TV viewership and student interest, all the way to the most, one of the most recent perspectives being that public health perspective, thinking about things like, policy, healthy initiatives, obesity rates, and things like that. And so we wanted to consider what perspectives are and should be influencing physical education today. And so we realize now that students' mental health and well-being is really important. Social responsibility is really important. Thinking about culture and identity. And so we're allowing those concepts to be what's pushing physical education forward, and allowing our standards to reflect that as well. And so in doing so, we're thinking about concepts like the whole child, thinking about our students for every aspect of who they are, looking at that social responsibility and an emotional well-being piece, and just looking at well-being in general, how our students are ultimately doing and what they're doing, what they're able to do, and what they're learning, looking at meaningful movement experiences. How do we make movement meaningful to students? How do we allow movement to be relevant to students, to really increase not only their ability, but their interest and the likeliness that they'll continue to be active throughout their lifetime. And also considering students' just overall physical literacy journey, recognizing that their journey is just as important as the destination, if not more important, right? And so we can't teach physical literacy, but rather we can develop that physical literacy, and we're capturing that in the idea of motor competency. And so that's kind of a brief overview of the direction we're going in, those perspectives that are influencing the work and that are influencing physical education today.
Yeah, thank you for that perspective. We have 4 attributes, but tonight we're only going to show you one of them. And so please be patient as I toggle through to share that document with you. In just a minute, I'll make it larger. Everybody seeing the new screen? Can somebody give me a thumbs up? Thank you, appreciate that. So here is the student attribute well-being. And from that attribute, we have drafted what we think might be a standard for this attribute. And as we begin to sort of brainstorm this standard, we're also brainstorming what kind of strands might be pertinent to this standard. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. You know what? Actually, I have one more slide before we get into, sorry, thank you for your patience. So this is what's happening next for you all. These are some dates that you might want to jot down. So starting Monday, the survey for public review and comment goes open. Keep checking the website. Also, if you're a member, I'm sure that you're going to get an email from Shape America with the link to that survey. And it's going to be open through May 16th. The task force has 2 sessions at Shape NOLA that we will be doing something very similar to here. This will also give people opportunity who have looked through, done the review, to actually give face-to-face comments if they would like. We're also going to do another town hall on May 11th. And then on May 16th, the public review and comment closes. So now I'm going to stop sharing and say thank you all for your time and patience. And yes, I just hit all 3 of my rings sitting here talking to you all. Must have been the heart rate going. Anyway, thank you all so much. And we are going to open it up to you all to have questions and comments, and we're going to do our best to answer them. So you can use the chat feature, or you can come off mute and verbally share your thought.
And feel free to turn your cameras back on at this time as well. This is our first brave soul. Comments, questions, feedback, thoughts?
It's perfect, right?
I have a question. This is Marcella from New Jersey. Can you hear me?
Yes, Marcella.
I was trying to follow. I got on a little late, like 10 minutes late, so maybe I had missed stuff. But what I'm interested in knowing is, you know, how deep are we going with race and including race in those standards, so that it's something that people are forced to talk about, because I think a lot of times in certain situations, people kind of run from that. And I see there, like in my state, I see that there's a big initiative to make sure that gendered people that identified, like gender identities and sexual orientation is included. But I just want to make sure on the national level, we're also including race on that. So I haven't seen everything. So if you covered that, I apologize. But that's something that I'm thinking about a lot since some of the revisions that occurred with the New Jersey standards.
Would any of the task force members like to answer?
I'll kind of jump in first, and then of course others as well. I think when it comes to equity work, I think my sentiment is I think race is probably one of the hardest things for us, and at least in this country and context, to talk about, right? As far as equity related topics. And so race is definitely something that is being considered heavily while developing these standards through not only the research that we're referencing and using to ground a lot of the decisions we're making, but the inclusion of our Shape America DEI task force, where there's also a lot of individuals who are well versed in the the concept of race and doing race-related research specifically, and especially in seeking to include that in our outcomes, right? Or for students, for teachers, and making sure that equity, especially or particularly in the interest of race, is something that's highlighted.
I would also just like to say that we are also being very careful that what we are creating is also not limiting. And so we have to make sure that these are available and are used everywhere. So let me give you an example. There are several states who have passed policies around being able not to use terms or specific phrases. An example would be critical race theory. So if we were to put critical race theory into that document, then that becomes a limiting factor. And so we are being very careful to think of both sides of not being limiting, but also thinking about how we want our educators to be equitable. So, and I think we address that really heavily in the guiding principles of what is expected of teachers to do, but it's also going to shine through in those attributes that we just showed. Any other task force members want to chime in? I do see that we have some other questions, and I want to make sure that we get to those folks too. But if anyone has anything really quick they wanted to add from the task force. Okay. Carly, can you help me manage questions from the chat, and or I see that Matt has had his hand up for a little while, but I don't know if something has come through the chat first. So I'm just trying to be respectful. Matt, welcome. Thank you. You have a comment or question?
Yeah, so this is, I mean, it's not that I'm looking for one thing or another, but I'm just kind of curious at how many standards we're looking at having. And the only reason I ask is I know being an elementary teacher that doesn't see the kids a lot, having a ton of standards can kind of get overwhelming for a lot of teachers that don't dive into them like a lot of us do. I know with 5, that seems to be more manageable, but it doesn't include all the things necessarily that we want. But I know sometimes if it's too many standards, it gets a little overwhelming. So I was just curious what we're looking at.
So in the document that you're going to see in the student attributes, you're going to see 4 student attributes with 4 potential standards. Remember, you know, these are just draft standards. We haven't solidified these yet. They're just draft standards. But right now we're sitting at a pretty number of 4. Rick?
Sally, there's a couple things in the chat before
Okay.
we go to our next hand, if that's okay.
Sure.
Just a comment here about adding a strand that includes understanding exercise science concepts. Was a comment that came through. And another question about, will there be outcomes or benchmarks for each of the standards similar to the current ones?
We are not there yet. There is going to be more. Remember, I had mentioned that right now what you're seeing is macro, and we will be eventually getting to a micro level. The task force, we're not there yet. We don't know what that's going to look like, but there will be a micro level. Is that a good way of phrasing that, Fran?
Yeah, that's a great way of phrasing it. I'd love to say a lot more, but we haven't collectively as a whole task force really had the opportunity to share our philosophical thoughts. Sally and I have been working on that a little bit. So there will be more to come, and we can assure you of that.
Any other questions in the chat, Carly, before we go to Rick?
I think we're good to go to Rick right now.
Okay, Rick, you're on, buddy.
Yeah, obviously some of these comments are a little bit off ignorance because we haven't seen the whole element of everything being laid out. But I guess when we look at 80% of our adult population is either overweight, obese, or severely obese, and 40% of kids are, Physical activity levels are really low. The inability, as we look at all the research of like health-related fitness knowledge and people being able to understand how to even develop their own health-enhancing fitness plans through exercise and things of this sort, is very, very low. And I guess it seems like today in this meeting, there was a huge focus on the social elements. And I guess I'm concerned that as you look at our data over the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years, based on that data, I would say that unfortunately within our field is that we are not doing a very good job of getting people to stay active and fit. And I guess I'm concerned as I hear today as the task force that I would have loved, I was really hoping to hear that there was going to be a really strong focus and like, hey, we've got to do a better job of giving kids the tools and skills to stay active and fit for the rest of their life. Because that's what we specialize in. And it doesn't seem like that is like a hardcore focus for us. And in our field, I feel like we're doing a really poor job of that. And like I said, I haven't seen everything. I was hoping to really hear a very strong focus on enhancing physical activity, physical fitness, and wellness through those modalities.
Rick, I would say that we are focusing on everything. If you caught what I said in the beginning, as a task force, we acknowledge that there's an importance to motor competence, but the research also shows that it cannot be the sole attribute to equitably serve the whole child on their path to well-being and physical literacy. And so I think once you see all of the information in the documents, I'm hoping that your perspective might change. And if it doesn't, that would be a great opportunity. You will have an opportunity to share in detail your ideas and thoughts related to some of the other attributes that that are there. I'm going to open it up to Corey, Susanna, LaDonda, whomever from I see Amanda. I know that there's some other task force members here. Does anybody else want to answer that question or jump in and add 2 cents?
I'll take a swing at it a little bit. I think one of the things that the task force was acutely aware of was the fact that many of the students for whom we teach don't see themselves in the standards, don't see themselves in the curriculum. And so the work that's been done thus far is to try to make sure that we are being very mindful of that, and that if they don't see themselves in the curriculum, if they don't feel connected to the content that we teach, they probably will not be physically active outside of our classes. And I think the other piece that we're very mindful about is that it's more than just the physical piece that contributes to overall well-being. And so we're trying to be more comprehensive in that approach. But I don't think it's been done at the cost of health-related physical fitness, for that matter. I think the thing that we've all been advocating for is to increase the likelihood that our children would be physically active as kids and then also as adults, because they do actually value what we teach. They have learned a particular set of knowledge and skills and gain motor competency in some skills. Is that helpful?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would also add that part of the problem is pedagogy and how teachers implement pedagogy. And the barriers that exist from school to school and district to district and state to state. So we have all that. We have thought about all of that. It's considered. So Rick, I hope you get into that full document, and I hope that your mind has changed. And if not, please provide us with feedback that you feel that we should consider. Carly, before I choose a person, is there anything in the chat that needs to be addressed?
I think we can go ahead and take George next. Ready?
Okay, great. Hi, George. Welcome to the game show.
Hey, Sally, can you folks hear me okay?
Yeah.
Great. I think I guess I was taking some notes, and I guess I'll kind of piggyback off of Rick said. I guess first I'll acknowledge that, I mean, I agree wholeheartedly that culture, affective, cognitive, social, and for all of us, when we taught those students, I'm sure those were a big part of what we did. It was a big part of what I did in my classroom. But I will say some agreement to what Rick is saying, in the sense that the way I view school and the building, PE, like if they're not learning, like they go to reading, they learn to read, and you can apply that in science and other subjects, whatever, but they need to learn to read. They go to math, they got to learn how to do math. In PE, these things are important, but if we have such limited time, if that time is spent learning and talking about strategies and cultures and other things, which they should be getting throughout their school day, in their math class, in social studies, in other subjects, I feel, teachers are gonna, not be able to execute and end up with an outcome of competent movers, physically literate individuals. And if they're not learning it from us, again, you talk about the sort of those different students that are out there, the kids that are involved in club sports and doing things, yes, they're getting it. But when we're talking about all students, where are those other students learning basic movements, learning how to play games, how to be fit, to do different lifetime activities, if not from us? So I guess my sort of question, and I know we only got a little snippet, so with respect to the task force, I mean, you just shared us a little, so I don't know the whole perspective, but I guess a question I have is, when you mentioned the different domains, cognitive, affective, psychomotor, and I believe you threw social in there as 4, is there kind of like a breakdown as far as the final standards? Is it like 25% of each, or 50 or so? And I feel I would just add, my personal opinion is that psychomotor, while again, they're all important, I leaned into all of them as a teacher. I think the best outcome is they learn those habits and they get to do it in your class. They come to you to move. That should be a heavier weight than the others, but they're all important. But we can only do so much. And I know everybody already knows that, and I know you guys are already considering that, but I just wanted to share my opinion.
So these are standards. It's not curriculum.
Oh, wrong button. I'm trying to put my hand down.
Okay.
Sorry.
Just a reminder that these are standards and not curricula. It's not curriculum. These are to be used for educators to use them to determine how to best write and create the curriculum for what is best for their context. We are not telling anyone that they have to do anything, whether you should do all of these or none of these. All right. We know what's important. We also know what the research says. And there have been so many barriers for us doing PE the way that we have been doing it. We haven't changed the obesity rates. The obesity rates haven't changed. And we've been, even when people are focusing on fitness and movement, obesity rates haven't changed. What we have been focusing on hasn't moved the needle. We have students who don't see themselves in these standards and who are not being engaged, because a lot of teachers are only engaging the higher skilled students. And that's because a lot of students don't find PE meaningful. So, like I said to Rick, look at everything, read it thoroughly, look at it, give us your feedback, and hopefully you'll see what we're trying to do. We're thinking about every student, all student, and all aspects of physical education.
I think, and I'll add too, I think another thing that would be important to say is that one of the things that we've been considering and talking about heavily is that there are a lot of different vital factors that we feel like should be incorporated into this new set of documents. However, I don't think anything new would be replacing, again, anything that is vital to the essence of physical education. And a lot of the concepts that we're talking about, we're putting a lot of effort in. How can students learn these things through movement, right? So that, if we're talking about a percentage of, I would say the movement, that psychomotor domain remains in nearly 100% of what we're doing. But how can we do those things through movement? So if we're talking about something social, we're talking about something affective, cognitive, how can we do that through movement, maintaining the essence of what physical education has been and should be?
All right, next question, moving along.
Yeah, Sally, I'll just add, I mean, there's lots of great comments in the chat, if you're not checking that out, around these being much more student-centered, seem to be a nod to meaningful PE, things like that. A question here on, are there opportunities for more social responsibility? For example, well-being is referenced here. I'm just kind of paraphrasing. To help discussions around well-being not being accessible by all, allowing for more conversations related to equity.
Yeah, like I said, I think that we are creating these for flexibility. And we are focused heavily on well-being because that is the whole child perspective, and it's part of the physical literacy journey. This is a journey. We can't teach physical literacy. We have to develop physical literacy. And so that's going to be, you're going to see that, you're going to see physical literacy journey, you're going to see well-being, you're going to see whole child embedded in these documents. And so it's going to come through, but it's going to give the teacher flexibility, especially when we get to that micro level. You'll see that come through a little bit more. Should we go to Joe?
Yeah, let's do that.
Hi, Joe. Thank you for joining the game show.
I'd like the curtain for 500, please. Yeah. First of all, I'd like to thank you on the committee. As someone who just spent the last several years rewriting our framework in Connecticut, I know what a frustrating thing it can be to have all those conversations go in multiple directions. And every time you think they're going in a linear fashion, they go off on a rabbit trail somewhere. So thank you for putting up with all of that. I have one suggestion that I think is a glaring omission in what we have so far. We talk a lot about the affective and social self. We look at that as being a key element of engaging children in such a way that we inspire them to want to be physically literate so that they can conduct a lifestyle that allows them to be physically fit forever. In the principles that in the macro that you unveiled before, it says know and be able to do. My suggestion is this: it should be know, feel, and be able to do. If there's one thing that we can inspire kids with, it's perceived competence. The human animal repeats behaviors that reward. They avoid behaviors that are painful, hurtful, or make them feel badly. If we can inspire kids to feel confident and competent, that's going to go a long way towards finally putting a dent into the data that Rick mentioned, which he's absolutely correct, for years and years and years has shown little or no change or has worsened in terms of our adult obesity rates. If kids feel they're good at something, they will do more of it. If they do more of it as a child, it will carry over into late teens and adulthood. So my suggestion, humble suggestion, is we're missing a huge piece if we're going to identify social and affective domains, but not pay any attention to what kids feel in class. I know from a standards perspective, that's a slippery slope to measure and prove. I get it. But I think somewhere, especially with all of the crosswalks that we've established in physical education as well as health education with the CASEL standards, I don't see how you go forward without having that third part of the mind, body, spirit connection involved. So that's my 2 cents.
Joe, I think you're going to be happy when you see the other attributes. I think you're going to be really happy.
May I just make a quick comment, Sally?
Sure.
Um, one of the comments that you're referring to is one of our attributes, and it's about meaningful movement. We've been doing a lot of reading and research. We've actually had a Zoom with a woman from Ireland and a fellow from Canada, and the meaningful movement really speaks to students learning how to reflect on their physical education experiences and journaling and finding that feeling piece. So, Joe, it is something that it's definitely on our radar, and I hear you and couldn't agree with you more.
Thank you, Fran. Any, before we go to Joseph, is there anything in the chat?
Yeah, just one more, Sally, and I know we're running short on time. What is the plan to support teachers in changing how they teach and what they focus on? Many have been trained to believe maximizing movement is the goal, and how to help them find a balance between movement and knowledge acquisition.
Yeah, so that's a great question. I want to just say that our plan is to make sure, hopefully in Seattle, when we unveil everything, that we have a good plan in place related to professional development, both virtually, webinar, in person, that we've got all of our documents, that we have this wonderful, beautiful package tied up and with a nice little bow, so that nothing gets left out or left behind, and so that people know how to use the standards and outcomes, if that's what we wind up calling them, to the best of their ability, to learn how to use them, to unpack them, and to make them usable for their context. We think about that all the time. We think about all the other materials and the professional development that's going to have to take place when this happens. So that's the answer to that question. Joseph, you're going to be our last question because we are at the 7:30 mark. Thank you for playing.
Thank you, and thank you to the committee for all this work. And so a lot of the discussion around motor competency, and I think I really like the direction from what I'm able to understand about where this is going, particularly the idea that all kids should be included, particularly those who have difficulty acquiring motor skills. And so when we're talking about motor competence, not every kid can acquire motor skills to do highly athletic types of things. And that's really what physical education is about. And so I think what we're talking about is, what is the definition of success? So if the old view perhaps was success is being able to perform, athletically, well, that just doesn't hold for a lot of kids. But I think the new view, and from what I'm hearing and really like, is a new definition of success, which has to do with I found a way for myself to be physically active and understand the benefits and feel confident and happy in living a healthy and active lifestyle. So if that's where we're going, I really like this direction, and thank you for finally moving the profession in that direction.
You're welcome. It's our pleasure and our pain.
I think we're all set. Any final words from you, Sally, or any of our task force members?
I think I've spoken enough tonight. So if anybody else would like to say something, I would certainly welcome something from our other task force members.
I would just say thank you to everybody that's here, because we'll get these bits of feedback and information, hear your concerns, and make sure that they always go back to the committee, and getting them kind of in waves, as Sally showed, the different times that feedback will be solicited. It's appreciated by the folks on the committee. We're trying our due diligence to hear everything that's being brought forward.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all, and be sure to check your email next week for when the full document of the draft guiding principles and student attributes will be available to you. And we hope that you'll continue to submit your feedback via the survey and/or join us in New Orleans and on the town hall in May. So thank you all so much for your time, and thank you from Shape America to our amazing task force members for all of your hard work as well.